All right, this is a 12:15 federal update by Ms. Kathleen Smith. Ms. Smith is a Senior Vice President and Director of Federal Relations for the Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance Agency, PHEAA. She joined the agency in April 2019. Ms. Smith represents PHEAA in Washington, D.C. and serves as the primary liaison between the agency and the U.S. Congress, along with other federal agencies. Prior to joining the agency, Ms. Smith held several senior positions in higher education and student aid-related organizations, including the role of Deputy Chief Operating Officer at Federal Student Aid, Special Assistant to the Secretary and Acting Assistant Secretary in the Office of Post-Secondary Education in the U.S. Department of Education. That's a long one. As well as roles within the Office of Post-Secondary Education under multiple administrations. Ms. Smith has held positions with both the U.S. House and Senate Education Committees, beginning her career as a financial aid administrator for the Uville College in Buffalo, New York. She holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree in psychology from the Uville College in Buffalo, New York, a Master's of Public Education Administration from the University of New Haven in New Haven, Connecticut, and a Master's of Arts Communications, Journalism, and Public Affairs from American University in Washington, D.C. Great to have you, Kathleen. Nice seeing you again. It's been some time, and thank you for always being here for PHEAA. I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you guys so much. I know I've had the opportunity to listen to some of the sessions. I just want to echo everything pretty much most people have said. I'm really happy to be here with you today. I look like I'm sort of going in and out in this background though, so I apologize. But I'm just so much better in person where we can sit and we can talk and we can go back and forth and really interact. So I'm really so looking forward to that opportunity. I know I only had one shot before COVID hit and all our lives changed pretty dramatically. So thank you for giving me the gift of your time right now for a little bit. I'm going to attempt to share a few slides, and if I can lean on, since I see Dan, if we get questions in the chat, Dan, that I don't see, or if somebody could just ping me on that, that would be great.
And we'll keep an eye on it.
Okay. All right. So let me see if I can. I only have a handful of slides, so let me see. Oh my gosh, how do I do this? Oh, here it is. Okay.
While you're doing that, I just want a reminder to put everybody on mute. If everybody can please be on mute. Thank you.
Let's see. From beginning. Slideshow. Okay. Oh, look at that. Woohoo! Worked. Okay. So just quickly, this is sort of the feeling I get being in DC right now, right? There's like all of the stuff happening, not really sure who's doing what. You guys are probably reading a ton in the press about what is and isn't happening. I would say this, and I'm probably going to say it again, and I think I say it almost every time we talk. This is a very volatile sort of divisive time in Congress, as you know, that's not a secret. I would just say to you, when you are seeing things in media, in print, on radio, whatever, if you ever have a question about something you hear or see, I would really welcome the opportunity for you to reach out to me or anybody else. It is very often not fully accurate or taken out of context many of the times. And I just want you to know that you should never feel shy about touching base, because a lot of times, I've told this story very often, is I've been in meetings when I worked on the Hill and read about it the next day, and it was as I wasn't in that room. So just please feel free to reach out. I see John Fellarini now. Hi, John. How you doing? Okay, I'm glad to see you.
Thank you.
So just really quick, we're just going to go over kind of the top line items and that's going on from my vantage point from the administration and Congress, Department of Ed, and pretty much everyone who you've heard from PHEAA has touched on PHEAA, but I will do it one more time. So in terms of the White House, we've got some big bills in the mix, right? So much of what's happening through the White House is sort of codependent on what's happening in Congress. Again, some of this you probably are fully aware of in terms of the connection between infrastructure, reconciliation, and then the big ticket item about where we are on student loan forgiveness, which was just discussed a little bit in this hearing, which I will fill you in on. So the infrastructure bill, as you probably are aware, was passed in a bipartisan manner in the Senate. And that is the bill which really does address infrastructure, right? Roads, bridges, water, things like that. What has happened in the House is there has been made a connection to the passage of that bill as is in the House with the passage of the reconciliation bill. And just a really quick note on reconciliation is reconciliation is not a sort of standard piece of legislation, right? It has a different set of vote requirements. It's very sort of finance specific. It has very specific rules about what can go in and what cannot. And this is what you've been hearing about a lot in the press and on the news about, is it going to be 3.5 trillion? Is it going to be 2 trillion? Is it going to be 1.5 trillion? I'll tell you, it's so funny when you're here, if we throw trillions around like it's $1.50, I mean, we're talking enormous amounts of money. That bill is still being negotiated. And for the purposes of the House activity is holding up the infrastructure passage until those things are resolved. It was considered that there might be a deal put through as early as this week. Reports this morning are limiting that and less likely to happen. But just part of the reconciliation bill too is what has also been dubbed the Build Back Better. Some of that, what we're calling human infrastructure. And in that initially was going to be what you probably read about is free community college, increased Pell Grants, funding for MSIs, universal preschool, expanded Medicare, et cetera. A lot of those activities are now being either scaled back or taken out entirely. And there's some question whether the community college program will end up in the final bill because of the costs. I'm going kind of quick, so I want to keep us on time. So the initial costs in the Senate were 3.5 to 4 trillion. Again, causing changes to the underlying bill. So as I said, the connection between the two bills are holding things up, and negotiations are continuing between House, Senate, Republicans, Democrats, and the White House. On student loan forgiveness, and again, this came up a couple of times in this hearing that is happening right now in the House. Mr. Cordray, as you know, who's the COO of FSA, is testifying before the House Subcommittee on Higher Education and Workforce Investment. And he was asked about that, and he said that that is a decision, obviously, that the White House would need to make in terms of whether that's going to happen. He was asked several times about what I sort of half-kiddingly say the infamous memo. There was a memo released just prior to the end of the last administration indicating that a memo from Office of General Counsel indicating that the secretary and the president did not have the authority to just blanketly forgive loans. That memo was disputed. There was a request for Department of Justice and the Department of Education to review that and craft a subsequent memo, which is unclear as to whether it has been done and what, if anything, it says regarding that authority. So we're going to have to wait and see about whether that is something that is permitted going forward. As you know, there's been we'll touch on this a little bit, a lot of activity around loan forgiveness through other programs. There have been various letters recently released by members of Congress, both House and Senate, either seeking loan forgiveness in general, seeking release of the memo if it's done, and then sort of demanding that the White House use its power to go ahead and forgive debt. So in Congress, we're getting close to the end of the calendar year, and all sorts of things are happening. We are currently operating, the United States government is currently operating on a continuing resolution, or CR, and that is slated to expire on December 3rd. With that is also included the expiration of the debt ceiling, which is a topic we'll touch on in a minute. The House has completed several of its appropriation bills and the activity around that. They've completed, I think, 9 of the 12. Senate just last week released its cadre of legislative language for all of its appropriation bills, but have not taken, at least as I'm aware of this morning, no action in terms of committee work or floor work on those bills. Both sets, House and Senate, do have similar things in the Labor H bill, which is where all the higher education funding is. Increased Pell Grants, increased funding for sort of the campus-based programs, increased funding for minority serving institutions, et cetera. I think you'll see some of that stay in the bills going forward, but it's unclear whether we'll see what happens on December 3rd, whether we'll see another continuing resolution to get through the beginning of the year. There is some talk about whether there'll be an omnibus bill or the other thing we call as a minibus. I think a lot will depend on what happens with some of these other negotiations. There is very limited time in the congressional calendar right now. I count between now and the end of the calendar year around 20-something legislative days. That doesn't mean that can't change. And there are recesses put in there, as you can imagine. Getting through the holidays and things will make differences on how much gets done. I'm sorry, I have some things popping up on my screen here. So it's likely that we will not see a full appropriations set of bills on December 3rd, but something limited, if not another CR. This, like we said earlier, the Senate has passed its bipartisan infrastructure bill. As we speed toward 2022, there is going to be a concentration on the midterm elections. There is an election here in Virginia this November for governor, which is sort of being slated as kind of a bellwether for how the midterms might end up. Right now, we have just so you can get a breakdown of the different party setup in the House and Senate. In the House, there are 220 Democrats, 212 Republicans, and 3 vacancies. There is in the Senate, as you know, a 50-50 split that has had to require the vice president to come in and break ties. In Pennsylvania, we have 20 members in total, House and Senate, and we're split right down the middle, Republican and Democrat. And we have, just as you may have read about this too in local news, that Representative Doyle from the 18th district has announced his retirement, so he will not be running again after 2022. So I do want to say this about our delegation. I've just been so blessed to have some amazing staff, really members who really are in tune with what's happening in Pennsylvania and with us at PHEAA. We try to keep them updated quite literally on a weekly basis. I do an update to them from anything from our webinars to activity that's going on at PHEAA. And they've just been extraordinarily responsive and just really in tune with what's happening. So I would just, whenever you have the opportunity, to George's earlier point, while you may not be able to come to DC to see them in a sort of a structured format like with the government relations team, they are home in the district on a regular basis. You can see their calendar on the House and Senate websites. I would really encourage you, if you have the opportunity, to go to a town hall or stop by one of the district offices. You guys are such an important resource. And I would love to get George's feedback on how he felt he was received in some of these meetings that we had prior to COVID kicking in, because they just really have a keen interest in what you're doing and what and the students you talk. And this is so off script, but I'm going to ask George if you could give a 2-second how you felt about your meetings and the staff that you met.
Oh, I was really impressed, and I think the advice that you gave about keeping to the points, the topics, once again, it's advocacy, and we were very well received, and I think it was only one person that wasn't able to see us. I mean, even Mike Doyle invited us into the office and saw us personally, where others we were seeing aides, but I put a picture of us out there with Mike on the PHEAA app, and like I said, there wasn't one group that was discouraging, and they were all very receptive. They listened, and you gave us great advice on how to move forward. I mean, keep it short, to the points, and I really enjoyed that. So thank you very much.
John, I saw did you have anything you wanted to add in terms of outreach to members?
No, I mean, what you said and what George says is true. And what you said about town hall meetings. If you're lucky enough that your representative is given one, they're great to sit in. They really are. I mean, it really feels, it's one of the neater feelings just to kind of go to the, I live in Green Tree outside of Pittsburgh, and we showed up and, at the municipal building, and just to see your neighbors there and talking about any kinds of issues, doesn't have to be higher ed. It was really kind of cool to kind of meet your representative in that kind of format. So if you have the opportunity to go, I would say go, because it just makes you feel good about democracy in general.
That's great. Thank you. And again, it doesn't have to be a scary situation, right? You all know so much more than anybody could hope for. And what you guys bring to the table, it doesn't have to be, ugly political lobbying. It's really a lot of education process, right? I always make this joke, and you've heard me say it before, members of Congress are dealing with world peace and student aid, right? I mean, there's just like a huge, break there. And when you have limited time, just to have somebody they can call to say, what does this mean? We live in a world of acronyms. We have things changing consistently. You are also on the front lines of the information, right? So it would be really important, and I've expressed this to my friends at the department and elsewhere, that, when big announcements come out about new activity or new programs, to get as much information to all of you and all of us as possible is only going to help us help our students and our borrowers more, right? And to have you as a resource for somebody to call and say, hey, George, what does this mean if we do this? And sometimes it's just a back and forth discussion. It's not you taking a position. It's not them making a promise. It's they need assistance to be able to know the complexities of some of these programs. So I would just really, where you can do that and feel comfortable doing that, I would make that recommendation. So thank you both, to George and John, for letting me call on you here.
No, thank you.
Let's see, there we go. So, I went the wrong way. Hang on. Why is it doing this to me? Okay, one more time. Here we go. So speaking of the Department of Education and big announcements, the Department of Ed is in the middle of a ton of activity. My friends at the department and FSA are in the middle of trying to do a number of things, including implementation of the Futures Act, implementation of the FAFSA simplification. I wish I was in the room so I could see you all raise your hand about the acknowledgement of the PSLF waivers that we have some information. We'll break a few of these down. Borrower defense expansion. Mr. Cordray spoke about all of these just a little bit ago. Total permanent disability. There is some defaulted FELP activity occurring as well. I will tell you on FELP, the difficulty in talking to some people about that is there's a lot of people who don't really even know what FELP is, right? It's been gone for some time, and some staffers are just not fully versed in some of the FELP old activity and what those programs look like, or what that program looks like. And then negotiated rulemaking, of course. So as you know, Futures Act and the FAFSA simplification, Futures is where that was passed last year, where there is going to be a direct connection of data sharing between the IRS and the Department of Ed, which will be very helpful to borrowers and students completing the FAFSA. I think it will result in helpful activity for you all too, in having less, I think, verification issues come up. On FAFSA simplification, my understanding is the department has sought to extend that due to and he was very honest in this meeting saying, there's a lot of work and they need a little bit more time to get all of that in there. On the PSLF waivers, all of that information has been put out there about a week and a half ago. We are getting a ton of calls about very individual specific borrower situations of which we do not have all of the information yet in terms of implementation. The department has put out a fact sheet, sort of Q&A-ish, which we are referring people to until we have all of the final implementation requirements for those changes. I would, again, I wish we were in the room so we could talk, and maybe we can talk a little bit after this. I would be interested in hearing what you're hearing in terms of students who may be contacting all of you, in terms of what this means for them. That just helps us sort of craft questions, additional questions for the department when we're talking to them. On the defaulted FELP activity, just as a little bit of context there, the department put out an announcement some time ago about providing some CARES Act benefits, again, 0 interest, no payments due, et cetera, for a small group or a limited group, I shouldn't say small group, a limited group of FELP borrowers, those who defaulted between a certain period of time post-pandemic, and asked the guarantee agency, of which PHEAA is one, we are considered a bundled agency, to go back and reverse on defaulted FELP borrowers meeting the box that they're in. Interest rate to 0, involuntary payments refunded, and then also working with lenders to whom rehabilitated borrowers were sold out to. So that is ongoing. There are some questions still about implementation, fully implementing the Dear Colleague letter around that provision and those activities, which is DCL 2103, if anybody wants to go back and look at it. So we are working quite diligently with the department to do what we can to make sure that those borrowers receive the benefits that the department has put forward for them to receive. The other thing that's happened, I'm sorry?
There's a question in the chat, and would you like to handle that now?
I can't see it with my thing up, so if you can tell me what it is.
Yes, we've been hearing some things from NASFA about a push to double the maximum Pell Grant. Is there any talk at the Department of Ed about this?
Unclear. That was an initial, doubling the Pell Grant was an initial, I believe, an administrative proposal as well. So I was a little surprised when we saw the appropriations bills come through. There was a $400 maximum. I think that's the same in the House and the Senate bill. So I think that's a goal. And I think whether it happens in one fell swoop or whether it happens over time, depending how the legislation looks when it's passed, will determine that. But I think yes, it's still in a discussion. 2, I don't know whether that will happen in one increment. It may happen over time. It's still in the discussion block though, for sure. Thank you for that. So negotiated rulemaking, I've been on pretty much all sides of this table over my lifetime, and this is such an interesting way to see it done virtually right now. It's just a little bit different for me, and I'm old, so I'm like technology challenged most of the time. Our own Alyssa Dobson is part of that. If she's on this, we'd love to get her input on this as well. There is a very large agenda for this negotiated rulemaking, and there is one subcommittee. Just a quick overview. So the last session happened. The next session, as you see listed here, is November 1st through the 5th, and then the third being December 6th through the 10th. I commend everybody involved. It is a lot of work for everyone involved, including the Department of Ed. So I really respect everybody giving their time to this. But just real quickly, some of the issues being discussed are total and permanent disability, closed school discharges, interest capitalization, public service loan forgiveness. Much of what I saw in the initial issue papers around PSLF mirror somewhat some of the announcement that was made. So trying to promulgate some of that. Borrower defense adjudication process, recovery from institutions, pre-dispute arbitration, income-driven repayment, false cert discharges, and more. There is a subcommittee also dealing with Pell for incarcerated borrowers or incarcerated folks with some of the other activity around higher education for that population. And there's, like I said, a special committee for that. So that's one of that is taking up a ton of time. We are watching it closely to see where we can be helpful to committee members in terms of addressing any of the specific issues. If I'm just going to do a shout out, if Alyssa's on, and if she wanted to pop on to speak at all to her activities in the NEGREG process, I'll give it a second or two if she's here.
Yeah, I don't see her in the participants list.
Okay. One of the things I did want to make sure you all were aware of is there is a piece of legislation that was introduced in the Senate called, I just got the title right. Hang on one second. The Fresh Start Through Bankruptcy Act. It's S-2598. It was introduced on August 4th with Senators Durbin and Cornyn as bipartisan sponsors of that bill. I wanted to bring it to your attention if you have not already looked at it. It's gaining some traction. Issues around bankruptcy, which also came up in this hearing, come up most years about whether student loans should be fully dischargeable in bankruptcy code or not. And of course, that would take a change to the bankruptcy code to do that, right? So this, in short, this legislation makes a couple of changes. One is it does keep the undue hardship provision for student loan discharges through bankruptcy, but it also adds a subsequent provision in that having to do with borrowers would be able to go to the bankruptcy without the undue hardship provision if they've been in repayment for 10 years. It's a little bit more detailed than that, but that's sort of the high level point in it. But the second part of that bill is what is being stated to be increased institutional accountability, creating provisions that require colleges with more than 1/3 of their students receiving federal student loans to partially reimburse the government if student loans are later discharged in bankruptcy. And there's sort of a percentage factor in there. So I just wanted to raise that with all of you. I don't know whether, what the ultimate situation will be with that bill. It has a lot of conversation around it. The student loan industry is taking good notice of it. But I wanted to make sure that you knew that there were two parts of that bill, one dealing with the loan itself and the other dealing with institutional involvement in that process. So just wanted to make sure you guys were aware of that bill. The other thing to touch on is obviously things that are happening at PHEAA. I should stop there. Do you guys have any questions? This is a lot of sort of big high level stuff. And one of the reasons why I don't do a ton of slides on these is because it changes so fast. And I always tease about when I do newsletter updates that by the time you guys get to see it, it's either changed or things have happened that I don't have time to update to get you that up-to-date information. So just on the sort of the big ticket items, do we have any questions or concerns or comments? No?
I don't
Okay.
see any in the chat.
Okay. Okay, so subsequent to that, obviously, that, oh, wait, I have to go back. That we have announced back in July our decision to cease our activity in federal student loan servicing. There's been some press around people's supposition about why that is. And as you can imagine, we are continuing to work very closely with the Department of Ed. We still consider ourselves very much a partner, and we want to take good care of our borrowers, both in the Commonwealth and across the country that we service currently. And we are not saying on December 14th, when the contract ends, that we are walking away, which has been a supposition of some. We are in it until the last borrower is transferred, and we are working again very closely on a daily basis. There are teams at PHEAA who are burning midnight oil to make sure that this process happens well and efficient and to the best outcome for borrowers. There's a lot that we can't speak publicly yet because we're honoring our partnership with the Department of Ed. And as soon as we're able to release more information publicly, we would be happy to do that. This is where I want to say again, that we just want to caution when you read stuff in the press around people who either have little bits of information around this or want to make various points, that if there are any questions at all around this process, there's a group of us who are happy to address it with you directly if you have any of those. So the last thing I wanted to just touch on is with the calendar as it is, with the amount of activity occurring, we are working really hard to keep borrowers informed, trying to manage fact versus fiction And again, if you have any students that come to you and you're unclear about information, we want to be able to be helpful for that. We're working close with our Pennsylvania delegation as well, as we move borrowers into repayment in February, or actually the end of January, early into February. It almost seems like that conversation has really gotten quiet, right? Because of all this new activity coming on. I will say this too, there was a rumor around the world the last week about something called Operation Fresh Start that was supposedly going to come out from the department last week. Mr. Cordray was asked about that in this hearing and said that while he did not have something to release about that specifically, that they are still looking internally at various ways to assist borrowers who are currently in default prior to entering repayment. There was a question asked about all of the borrowers going into repayment on February 1st, and really what a monumental task that is for everybody involved, student loan servicers, the Department of Ed, FSA, you guys who are probably going to get a ton of calls from people. And what he said was that while repayment will renew on February 1st, that not all borrowers will actually start paying on February 1st. That, and I don't know exactly what the plans are within the department to change that, but he made the point that borrowers are in different statuses, and I think they're working on some ideas to smooth that process as it happens. Again, if I was with you, I would love us to have a conversation about what you're hearing from borrowers, and maybe some of you can chat with me right now about what you're hearing in terms of concerns, fears. You know, are the conversations around loan forgiveness and potential changes going forward inhibiting borrowers being able to sort of make repayment decisions? Do you think borrowers are going to, you know, need special sort of categories of communications, and how you feel like that would be best handled? I really would love to hear back from some of you if we have about 5 or 10 minutes at the end here to have a conversation. Lastly, you know, sometimes I used to say that when I was working in a student aid office and things got crazy and really busy around, you know, registration time, progress review and all of that, that I would get close to the edge, and my staff used to have to pull me back from the edge. Well, it's finally happened. I am in fact going over the edge. So on Thursday afternoon, my colleague Steph Martell and I are going to be rappelling off a building in Harrisburg. My understanding is it's 21 stories high, to raise money for Big Brothers Big Sisters. So you'll see me dangling, something I've never done before, but I think it'll be fun. I trapeze, so I'm hoping that that's similar to how that feels. But we're excited to do it. It'll be fun. We were supposed to be Friday, but I guess you guys are going to get some bad weather on Friday, so we're moving it to Thursday. So anyway, that's a lot of sort of big ticket information in a very, very short period of time. Let me get rid of this because I really would love to have us. I have no idea how to stop doing my screen. Dan, how do I stop doing my screen?
In your share screen function there, at the top. I think that's where the control is. If you hover over, you might get a control
It
that
says-
pops down.
Yeah, it says stop
Oh,
share.
stop sharing,
Stop-
where it has
stop
big
sharing.
red letters. Okay, I got it. Thank you for that.
Got
Oh. So if I can put some of you on the spot, I really, it would be helpful to me to hear what you're hearing from your students in terms of, are you hearing nothing, which says something, or are you hearing concern about the repay restart? And what concerns do you have about the repay restart? Come on, I know some of you out there. We can stop recording if you rather do it that way. But it really would be helpful to have a little dialogue where we have a few minutes left to be able to do that. Hey, Justin. Maybe Justin will start us off the conversation. No questions. That's interesting. That is a little bit surprising.
Yeah, Leroy Spicer says, we've been very surprised by having no questions on it.
Kathleen, I think one of the things that the servicing companies really need to focus on is
Mhm.
re-educating. Coming off the fact that some students don't even know that their loans are not accruing interest right now and going
Mhm.
right back into it. I think this would be a great opportunity for a lot of our servicing companies to kind of start from the bottom up again, to help re-educate through communications. Emails are great, but 90% of emails are never touched. You know, we got to try to get that out to their hands, either physical addresses or text messages or TikTok, you know, those other communications, just to kind of give them that, meet them where they are,
Mhm.
to try to, again, just address those base concerns and help educate them how to make wise decisions as they go through the borrowing process.
Mhm. That's a very good point. And actually, Jonathan raised a good point in the chat too, saying that you're dealing a lot more with questions about the PSLF waiver information, right? Than repay, because that's the latest thing that's, hit the media. What kind of questions, Jonathan, or if you're able to share, are you getting around that?
Again, I apologize. I'm no longer in servicing, but from what I'm hearing from past colleagues, it's more about the qualifying payment count, and reviews to that, and disagreements with how many payments they actually are shown as having been counted. The waiver really came up just as I was leaving, so I'm not terribly familiar with what's going on in regards to that.
So you raised a good point. If I can do a little plug, because I didn't do it, so I can brag about it. So PHEAA has spent a lot of time, and we were given a, as an executive team, given a review of this. It's some time ago now, and I was so impressed with it. We did it for members of Congress because a borrower can now go into their portal that we manage and drill down on every payment they've made, and whether it's qualifying, whether it's eligible, what the status is, why it's in that status. I mean, it really gives borrowers control now of going and not just seeing their loan, but seeing each one of them, each payment that's been made. It's really a good opportunity. I do a lot of, members of Congress will call me and have a constituent issue. I always direct them there because it's just top notch. It's a great tool for borrowers to have and really sort of take some control of their accounts. So just kudos to the team at PHEAA who did that, because it's really quite amazing. Regina brings up another extraordinarily important point, which actually the trades that we belong to, EFC and Share Salsa, have tried to address as well. There is some level of concern about sort of a reinvigoration of some of the what we call scammers. And I don't mean any disrespect by people who are doing genuine financial aid counseling out there, but that with servicers leaving and that sort of press not being always very clear about what that means, and then all this waiver stuff, that scam artists could be calling borrowers or having more impact on borrowers, saying, well, you don't want to call them because they're not going to be your servicer anymore, so pay me $100 and I'll take care of it, or however that works. So we are looking at that. We look at some of that anyway, but do have some level of concern about how best to manage that situation as well. So any advice or input you guys have on that, of course, would be helpful as well. Another question, my only questions have been, are my loans going to be forgiven? Yeah, I do worry a little bit about that, because I'm super old school, just because I'm super old. In the old days, like when I got my student loan, I had to go to the bank and they handed me a check and there was no, this is a loan. I do worry about all the conversation out there around loan forgiveness and waivers and PSLF and all of it sort of getting commingled, that borrowers may be a little hesitant to start repay, or feel like they may not need to, in hopes of loan forgiveness. So to Scott's point, there needs to be a lot of education for borrowers around this move back into repayment and all the stuff that's swirling around it. Let's see, we have organization for myself. I have a friend paying off direct loans now for 10-year-old MBAs. Actually, I have to auto pay. I don't have to do anything if they will start up again. Yeah. So auto pay is an issue as well. And I don't want to be quoted on this. If anyone from PHEAA is on there and knows the answer to this, I'm pretty sure borrowers are going to have to re-up their auto pay this time around. So we want to make sure that borrowers are taken care of in that too. It may be, this is a big deal. Like this has never happened before, right? We have never had, turned off the systems, for lack of a better phrase, and put everybody back into repayment around the same time. So I think what I'm asking all of you and asking sort of the folks I talked to on the Hill, as well as everybody, is going to do their absolute best to have this happen as smoothly and efficiently as possible. But like to give each other some grace on this, right? There's going to be, even on the best transition times, there's going to be a flaw now and then. There's going to be somebody who doesn't fit the mold in terms of systems. And we just need to work together to do what we can to make this as seamless as possible for borrowers. There's a group of borrowers, as you guys know, right, who were in distress prior to the pandemic. And now, through the pandemic and coming out, they're going to be in distress still more than likely. So we really need to give special care to all of our borrowers, but that group of folks, we really want to spend special attention to make sure that they understand. Again, to Scott's point, there's also a group of borrowers who went into repayment right around the pandemic, right? So who never really actually were actively in repayment. So this is going to be brand new for them as well. And I know that when I worked at a lending institution 1,000 years ago, borrowers would just sort of forget after the 6-month grace. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't defiant. It was just like life gets busy and you need to get out there and get back into repayment. So Tom, I see your hand up.
Yeah, so
Nice to see you.
Kathleen, to Scott's point, I think specifically the borrowers that are in the 2021 cohort, they've never been in repayment.
Right.
They could have, they've used their grace period. So I think that group of students in particular, we have to be concerned about all our borrowers, but that group in particular is really critical. 2022, that cohort just started. So I think they'll be in their grace period, but yeah, 21, if you're going to focus on anything, that's the cohort to focus on.
Right. Thanks, Tom. Scott?
Yeah, I was just thinking about this as well. I know when I previously worked at American Education Services, we would do proactive calls for students in their grace period that were entering repayment. Do you feel that might be another approach that servicers can take, or is it going to be too many man hours, if you will?
I know that we're working closely with FSA because we are, as a servicer, as you know, sort of somewhat restricted about what we can send out, what we can say, and how we do that based on the contract with the department. So we are, and I'm sure, Tom, you guys are doing the same, like everybody's working together to come up with the best plans. My understanding is the FSA has sent out some emails at this point and are trying to get the word out. We're also working with our social media team because, to your earlier point, Scott, meeting borrowers where they are. With borrowers to get them, again, as you said, it's sort of going to be a re-upping of the education around getting into repayment. So very hopeful that hoping for the best, hopeful that it will work out well, and that all the education that we're doing between now and the end of the year will be beneficial. But again, if you guys, please, I'm almost out of time here, but you have my email. If you have a thought or a process, or you're seeing a trend with students that are coming into your office or calling you or emailing you about certain questions, please let me know that, because that would help us sort of direct some of our responses as well when they come in. Somebody's asked me for the name of the bill that deals with bankruptcy. It's called the Fresh Start Through Bankruptcy Act. It is S2598. Do we have, this is where, again, I wish we could just sit with coffee and chat, because I have a million questions I'd want to ask all of you guys about what's happening in your world and what you're seeing on the front lines.
We can all stay here. There's a break till 1:30, and whoever wants to hang out here, we can hang out. I mean, if that's okay with you, Kathleen.
Yeah, I've got about probably another 10 minutes that I can be here. I would love to have, what are you guys hearing for your borrowers who are, or your students who are coming back to school, in school, worrying about year end? Where are you? What's the main, what are you seeing as your main control, and what do you want to see if reconciliation happens? Is it Pell? Is that the most important thing that you see? Is it other institutional funding? Is it campus-based programs? What is it? I'm going to pick on John Fellerini since he's my partner in crime.
The answer would be yes to all.
Yes to all of it.
I mean, I know also we've heard about, fees on direct loans, obviously, is a big one too, that I always hear about from people. And that's a personal pet peeve of mine too. So, but yeah, campus-based aid would be not increases to that. Yeah, double the Pell, obviously, increase the Pell, expand the Pell. Sure it gets out further, to people. With with that hard drop for somebody that has an EFC, can we draw this out longer? Stuff like that. Those are all the things that I think about. I was going to ask you, Kathleen. There was a change. Bob Casey's office, Julia's gone.
Yes.
He wrote the letter recently I saw in NASFA about, hey, can we waive the verifications, for an upcoming year with, I think, Representative Castro, and I think from Texas. And, I wrote them a letter just saying, yes, it was a very good letter. If you read it, he laid it out very well. So that was something that I followed up with their office for about as well, because they did write a very good and logical argument about, hey, can we keep this going for waivers of verification for another year? So that was one little thing that I wrote a letter on behalf of, just saying, hey, we would like that to continue. There is definitely a cost with verification. So those are some.
And if I can, I just want to give a shout out to John and the government relations team. I think everybody is really committed to doing what they can and to be helpful in this endeavor of, trying to educate Congress. And I did mention, John, I think before you got on, that we had a Zoom meeting with the Pennsylvania delegation. I don't even remember when that was, several months back now. And there was a really nice, it was a good number of the offices that participated. There was a good conversation by all of the members of the team. And I think it was a real positive situation. And I think we may have to go back and do that again as we get closer to the end of the year, since it looks like we're not going to have in-person meetings real soon, unfortunately. So.
I still need that budget item, George, so we can, one day when we get back, we're going big.
No, I agree. And I think we need to start rotating through and making sure that we give a lot of people the opportunity to be there. So we need to make sure that the opportunity is there for a lot of, different people.
Yeah. Anything else? Anybody want?
In the chat, I think there's two more in the chat. One about hitting schools for a portion of students.
Yeah. I'd have to pull out the legislation. I have it here. I'm happy to discuss that with you offline if you want. It's done as a percentage. If you're talking about the bankruptcy bill, it says. So it says, if a covered student loan is discharged in bankruptcy, the covered institution of higher education to which the debtor of bankruptcy made payment shall pay the Department of Education an amount determined in accordance with the following. And then they do an amount to 50% of the amount, and then it breaks it down into different percentages. So I'd have to, again, and this is a proposal, it's not in law yet. And then it goes from 30 to 25 to 20%. I don't see a size differential, but I'm happy to examine this a little bit more and have you give me a buzz and we can talk about that offline a little bit. Follow up as to whether the customer has to sign up for direct debit again when repayment starts up. They do not need to. FLS unless their bank info has changed. I don't want to speak out of turn. If there's any of my colleagues from PHEAA on the call who know the answer to the direct debit question, I would encourage you to pop up. It went back and forth a couple of times to having to realign all of them to not having to do it. So I think they have to sign up again, but I will triple check that as well and make sure to get you that answer, Jonathan.
Okay, yeah, I had checked with a supervisor with Fed Loan Servicing, which is who FLS is.
Yeah.
And she said they did not unless the banking
Okay,
information
great.
was changed. But that's, I just,
All right, good. I
will.
will. All right, yeah, I appreciate that. I will triple check that, yeah.
Sure.
And then the bankruptcy bill.
Kathleen,
Okay.
Bill Burke. Yesterday during the PHEAA update, Elizabeth announced a forgiveness program for nursing that I believe was federally funded
Yes.
going through the states, if I'm heard her correctly.
Yeah, it's
Any other
Yeah.
professions, or are you aware of any other upcoming opportunities for such type programs?
no, I mean, in one of the higher ed bills that were proposed a while back, there was an expansion of some of the public. Excuse me for 1 second. Apologies. Hang on 1 second. Sorry, it was hearing related. I apologize. There was some conversation in some of that legislation to expand some of it. I think one of the House bills had adjunct institutional professors in there, but in terms of actually specific programs in each of the states, no. I think nursing is the one that was put through by our legislature in Pennsylvania. So I'm not aware of any new ones, but I will tell you that there's a lot of activity around student loan discharges and forgiveness just in general here. And I hate to, I guess to some rumor, there's always a little bit of truth, but until the department comes out with what was supposed to be coming out last week about what they're going to be doing around borrowers entering repayment and any other sort of relief that may be provided, I'm going to hold my powder until I see it in writing. Thank you for that question, though. I appreciate it. Who's going to jump off the building with me? John Fellerini. You can get down there and root me on, man. I'll take prayers. I'll take prayers and good vibes about this.
I swear, if it wasn't for the shoulder, I'd join you.
I'm excited. It'll be fun. That's true. It would take your mind off it if you did it.
Yeah.
That's Dan Ray,
exactly.
the pirate.
Yeah.
I feel bad. I should go get my Minnie Mouse ears. That's what I'm going to be for Halloween.
Yep.
Anything else? I really appreciate you guys so much. Like, I really just, I'm really so hopeful that we can be in person next year and really engage in some of this. This is really important stuff, but I have to tell you, and I know I'm biased because my life as a financial aid officer, while it was a gazillion years ago now, really has formed and just maintained my foundation of what I do every day and what I have in my head when I'm looking at policy, and whether it was at the department or in the House or in the Senate. And I just really, you guys are so underappreciated in the world of people who have not sat where you do. So I get a little cranky when certain people in authority make, broad statements about what happens in a financial aid office, never having been in it. And I just think you are truly unsung heroes. Sort of the quiet office at the institution, right? As all things are going well, and when something goes bad, everybody's on top of you and you get little praise. And I just want to tell you from where I stand, you're all heroes to the students that you work with. And it's far more than just sending some dollars amounts from your office to another. It's really working with these students and families and helping them get through probably one of the biggest investments they'll ever make, and let them know that they can do it and do it well. So I personally just want to thank you all for the work you do. I think it's a ton harder now than it was when I did it. And just really appreciate your work. Appreciate you being so kind to me when I call some of you for input and assistance, and just thank you for letting me be part of this group. I appreciate it.
Kathleen, what would you say to people who might be thinking about emailing you, but they think you're too busy and they don't want to bother
Please.
you?
No, it's not a bother at all. I will be honest enough to tell you that I don't know about you all, but and I don't know if it's COVID, everything's COVID related, right? Like my email has like, but it is never a bother. I am never too busy. If I don't get back to you right away, I promise I will. But I would, please feel free. It's just kathleen.smith@phea.org. Thank you for that question, Dan. Or give me a call, and if I can't address it immediately, or I don't know the answer, which happens on occasion, I will find you the person that does for sure. So yeah, anytime. Anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. We always appreciate your support also and being here.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Listen, have a great rest of your conference. I'm hoping to be able to hear my friend Justin Drager, who has far more information probably than I do, and is a great representative for all of you all. So thanks for being here, Justin, as well.